I wonder how many people think this is the first time a beam struggle's happened. Ki from the Dragon Ball series. What can I say? It's simultaneously both one of the worst power mediums and one of the best in anime. Okay, it's kind of hard to explain why without actually elaborating on it, so let's just jump into this. Ki is the source of most, if not all, of the characters' abilities and powers within the world of Dragon Ball. You got the Kamehameha, the Kienzan, the Makenko Seppo, the Kikoho, the Super Saiyan transformation, Kaioken, Flight, Genki Dama, Multiform, and then you got abilities that aren't explicitly related to Ki, such as Regeneration, Mimicry, and Immortality, which isn't really much of an ability, it's more like a trait, characteristic. But essentially, in the end of the day, Ki is the thrust of the story, the way all fights are conducted, the way all special moves are developed, the way all transformations are formed. Ki is responsible for all of it. But how does Ki work? That's where things get a bit iffy to explain because the story doesn't really explain much, so it's been left up to the community to explain it themselves. Ki is a sort of life energy given physical form that can be manipulated by will of the user to enable them superhuman abilities like super strength, super speed, super durability, and the aforementioned flight. One must master their manipulation of Ki to have access to these abilities, however, which requires the user to have a strong body capable of harboring that Ki. So the average Joe doesn't possess any aptitude due to lacking the proper physical training, but every individual possesses Ki, and every individual is capable of using it within the story. Even Hercule, he's just a stubborn idiot. Once an individual becomes strong enough to use their Ki, they can use it to do a wide variety of things. Fire energy blasts, create energy swords, fire energy waves, create energy orbs and discs, fire energy waves. Okay. Wait, but there's also a variety of things that the characters could do with their Ki that never gets an explanation, like Tien's multiform technique, or his solar flare, or his multi-arm, or the Mafuba, or the Kaioken, or even more recently the time skip, or Ki transfer, which was never established to be a thing that you could do, but then it was conveniently done when it was pretty much the only option. Huh. Ki is very contrived, isn't it? It can do anything, but it's never really explained how and why it can do anything. I guess we're just supposed to believe that it all works this way and not ask any questions because you've already suspended your disbelief a long time ago, huh? There's no branches of Ki types, no explanation on the mechanisms of Ki that justify how it enables people to manipulate time, or fly, or create physical clones. That also doesn't factor in things like magic and psychic abilities, which are detached things from Ki and exist within their own spectrum of the story. But psychics and magicians can also use their powers in similar ways to enable them flight, but also do crazy things like mind control and turning people into candy. But that's not even related to Ki, so it's only worth mentioning. Further elaboration would be impossible either, since there's even less information on these two concepts in the Dragon Ball series than Ki. Basically, Ki can do anything the story needs it to. Granted, you can link a lot of the properties of Ki to the real-world equivalent of Chi, because that's what it takes inspiration from, but I'm not one to just let things go unexplained because I can just read a book about some real-world thing that's supposed to justify it. That's basically the same as, it's magic, fuck you. One thing we can talk about, however, is how Ki is connected to another important aspect of the series, and power levels. Power levels are easy to explain as essentially a quantifiable estimation of an individual's capabilities based on the amount of Ki that they possess, their physical strength, and their application of Ki. A higher power level means that you can perform greater feats, such as destroying cars, or mountains, or cities, or the moon, or even a planet, all with the wave of a hand or the point of a finger. Thanks to Ki, the upper limit of what an individual would normally be physically capable of with their normal human bodies can be amplified exponentially. For instance, you or I would not normally be able to lift a truck with our normal human bodies, but with the application of our Ki, we could raise our power levels to give ourselves the strength to be able to accomplish that feat. Power levels, however, are not a reliable source of information of an individual's strength, because the concrete numbers that are stated can only tell you the amount of Ki an individual is outputting at a given time, and does not tell you what their upper limit is. For instance, Future Trunks was estimated to have a power level of 5, which is the equivalent of an average human being, but he was able to decimate a group of Frieza soldiers with ease who have an average power level of 1500. And those numbers are nothing when you compare them to Goku's 8,000 plus power level from 2 sagas earlier, or his 9,000 power level from just 1 saga later. For a comparison, a power level of around 180 was strong enough to destroy the Earth's moon. A power level of 18,000 is enough to destroy the entire planet, and you even have characters like Frieza, who, when in his weakest possible form, possesses a power level of 530,000. So yeah, power levels are pretty crazy. But power levels don't only result in high destructive capabilities, however. Higher numbers means an increase in all of their abilities. Higher speed, higher durability, greater reflexes, and greater ki output are all things that come with that higher number, which is important to know because a power level of 180, despite being capable of destroying the moon, wouldn't even put a scratch on an individual with the power level of just 1500, let alone 18,000. So that number is almost everything. In combat, the most important factor is that number. Not skill, not techniques, not intelligence, not strategy. Nothing is more important than that number. The only time all of those other things factor in is if they result in a higher number, or if your number is relatively close to your opponent's number. If your power level is 400 and your friend's power level is 430, you can still beat your friend in a fight as long as you make up for the strength you're lacking with superior techniques, skill, or strategy. Unfortunately, in the Dragon Ball series, the enemies' numbers are always so much higher that it's hardly a factor. But wait, there's actually a way you can raise your number on a moment's notice. By manipulating your ki to surround your body, which gives off the effect of a transparent aura circling your body, you can increase your number temporarily, which comes with ki depletion over time if you continue to output that ki. You can also use this method in bursts to give yourself a slight advantage against stronger opponents, or at least temporarily put you on an even playing field. Also, by using certain techniques that require you to charge or output large amounts of ki, you can increase your power level significantly against stronger opponents. Now, as far as ki and power levels go in terms of how they impact the story, the latter ends up being problematic as a storytelling device in the long run, and here's why. In the Dragon Ball series, he who is stronger will often be the one to triumph over their opponents. That is not the case for every opponent, but it does apply to a large amount of the story, even in Dragon Ball with the likes of Tao Pai Pai. The problem is that, as I mentioned before, it leads to the most important thing in a fight to be strength, which isn't always the case in a real battle. The characters in Dragon Ball always have to fight harder rather than smarter, and if fighting harder doesn't work, then they just give up. Not like fighting smarter would work anyway, because not only will a power level of 75,000 do nothing to a power level of 1 million, who move so fast that the lower number couldn't even see them, but also, Dragon Ball characters are stupid. And I mean, they're really fucking stupid. The most intelligent techniques that anyone possesses are seldom used in exchange for powerhouse techniques that can just overwhelm the opponent. Techniques like the Mafuba or the Multiform or the Solar Flare just aren't worth using. To be fair, why would they? Because if those techniques lower their ki output or come at the risk of their life or have no destructive capabilities, then for them it would be a misuse of their ki, despite all the advantages that these type of techniques would provide. Goku and Vegeta are often thought of as fighting prodigies due to the fact that they win a lot of fights and are the strongest, but in terms of intelligence, the smartest Goku has been in any of his fights was from early in his youth before he began training that intelligence for power. Vegeta is a prodigy because he learned to overcome the Saiyan's tail weakness, which Goku did when he was 15, and he can even imitate techniques that he's seen once, like Krillin's Kienzan, despite the fact that all that technique is your ki skewed into a disc shape and spinning around. I don't imagine that's very hard to pull off. Goku fights against a monster that can absorb ki, so the more power he outputs, the more powerful the monster can become. This is a scenario where Goku would actually have to think of a new way to approach his opponent because he never went up against anything like this before. And he just powers up more, which overloads the monster and kills it. Nice. And Vegeta thinks he's a genius for doing this. Piccolo is the character that the audience would think is the smartest fighter amongst their group of warriors, and I don't disagree that he is, but Piccolo isn't that much to brag about in battle. Yeah, he always seems to have a new technique up his sleeve, but how often does it even work? Because most of them rely on him being equally as, if not stronger, than his opponent in order for them to work. The Special Beam Cannon was the only new technique that he invented that came in handy. Once. And then it didn't do anything to Super Perfect Cell in the anime filler, and he never uses it again. And that technique is a power-based technique anyways. But the Hellzone Grenade is actually a pretty intelligent tactic, though. Why would your opponent assume that you would be suspending stray ki blasts that pass by them? But like, the only person he ever uses it on in Z is able to block it with a barrier. Piccolo is the guiding voice and is by far the most competent fighter amongst the group of the Z-Fighter warriors, but he's not that intelligent of a fighter when you compare him to the likes of, say, Gon from Hunter x Hunter, who's constantly trying to compensate for his strength disadvantage with tactics that leave his opponent open for his devastating attacks. Or even Polnareff from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, who is pretty much a dive-in headfirst type of character, who is still smart enough to take advantage of mirrors to deal with a demonic doll while he's under a bed and can't see, or managing to hide away from and fight against a sadistic creepy man while being younger and weaker and missing his adult memories. Midoriya is a headfirst type of character himself, but he also relies on strategies and understanding his opponent's abilities occasionally in order to increase his chance of a victory. But Dragon Ball characters do not have any feats that match these levels of intelligent battling. I think the smartest I can remember Goku being is when he broke that wall to freeze a monster that was immune to his attacks. And props to him on that, because that actually required some thinking and observation, but that's about it. Goku even had to use his Kaioken conservatively against Vegeta due to the disadvantage that it would leave him in, but in the end he still just powered through, went all out, and broke his body anyways. And despite the bruises and everything that he got, it all worked out for him in the long run, because if he didn't do that, he wouldn't have been strong enough to handle the Ginyu Force when he arrived on Namek. Power levels hold back the creative potential of the series because all the writer Akira Toriyama has to do to raise the stakes is increase those numbers. All he has to do to tier characters is assign numerical values to them. Granted, he stopped using numbers in the latter half of Z, but the damage had already been done at that point. Power levels as a whole can be harmful in a story if they become the only thing that matters. So in conclusion, Ki is versatile and contrived as hell, power levels are a bad storytelling device if not handled carefully, and overall the medium as a whole is a solid 5 out of 10. But I'd take that rating with a grain of salt, as I'm hard pressed to rate it any higher due to how little thought was clearly put into it. Akira Toriyama just writes it to be able to do whatever is convenient for the story, and while Dragon Ball is an entertaining and appealing story, that does not excuse its power medium and all of its flaws. I still do love imagining myself in the world with all of its absurd glory, with me shooting energy blasts and the iconic Kamehameha though, and I don't think my love for the series will ever fade, even if my feelings towards it have changed over the years once I began looking at it less as a fan and more as a critic. Poor human characters, they never stood a chance. Anyway, that's about all I have to say in regards to Ki and power levels. I hope the information I provided is of use to any of you who are confused about Ki at all, and I hope you have a nice day. If you like this video, then doing that thing that ensures you'll see my next video would be appreciated. This is Silverbean, and I hope you have a nice... oh wait, I already said that. Okay, I'm recording this a bit late, like, I'm not even recording this how I usually do, and this isn't even on the script, but I forgot to mention Godly Ki. Godly Ki is Ki for gods, and you can't sense Godly Ki, and the way you get Godly Ki is you just use regular Ki and you don't let any of it leak out, and people will try to convince you that it's different. The regular Ki, it really isn't. It's just you're conserving more Ki, so it's like you're letting less Ki leak, so it's less... Godly Ki is stupid.